Very good afternoon once again, and many thanks for staying with us right here on NTV Uganda. My name is Romeo Busiku, and I come to you yet again with another pertinent conversation. How best can we ensure that we enhance women's participation in decision-making positions within the refugee structures? Uganda is home to 1,494,505 refugees in this country. Uganda is home to 1,494,505 refugees. Out of that number, 52% are females, and that number is around 769,939. So our biggest conversation is going to be largely centered around how best we can enhance women's participation in decision-making positions within the refugee structures. I do know that as of May 2021, the top 3 refugee contributing countries were the Southern Sudan. It was contributing over 65% of refugees right here in Uganda. Also, the Democratic Republic of Congo was contributing over 30.8% of the refugees in this country. And lastly, we do know that 3.6% of the refugees in Uganda are coming in from Burundi, majority of whom are women. So how best can we ensure that we enhance women's participation in decision-making positions in that regard? I do have panelists who are joining us via Zoom. We have Ms. Dawson Kusasira, Community Services Officer, Office of the Prime Minister in Kampala. We also have Mr. Titus Joko. He is a Refugee Desk Officer, Office of the Prime Minister, coming in from Adjumani District. We shall also speak to Ms. Adekemi Ndiali. She is the Deputy Country Representative of UN Women Uganda. Ms. Margaret Ann Atieno, Assistant Representative of Protection under the United Nations Human Commissioner for Refugees. She shall be actually expounding more on the plight of refugees. Also, Ms. Lily Anek is a woman refugee leader hailing from Adjumani District. She will also be joining us remotely via Zoom to talk about the plight of the many women within the refugee settlements. What happens to women when they are not in decision-making positions? Lily Anek shall expand more on that. Dr. Chris Dolan is the Director of Refugee Law Project. He also joins us via Zoom. We shall also have Mr. Apollo B. Gabazida, the Country Director of Care International right here in Uganda. But first off, we kick off this conversation by engaging Ms. Adekemi Ndiali. She is the Deputy Country Representative of UN Women Uganda. A very good afternoon, Adekemi Ndiali. We would like you to paint for us a picture of the plight of women within the refugee settlements when they are not in positions of power. Acquaint us.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity for us to share our experiences on the refugee response here in Uganda. First, for those who are not familiar with UN Women, UN Women is the United Nations entity for gender equality and the empowerment of women. And for humanitarian settings, we work very closely with the Office of the Prime Minister, as well as UNHCR, who are the lead UN agency in humanitarian action. And our effort is all aimed at achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women. We are guided by various international and national instruments, some of those that have been domesticated, and key of which are the CEDAW protocol. We also have the CEDAW convention, SDG 5, which many of you may be aware of, which is aimed at ensuring gender equality and the principle of leaving no one behind. The United Nations Security Council has also put in place a resolution 1325 in the year 2000, aimed at promoting women's participation in women's peace and peace and security processes. And there are other legal instruments and policy instruments that support the work of UN Women, and not just UN Women, but for those actors that are promoting the rights of women within the refugee response, including the Interagency Standing Committee guidelines, as well as very specifically on this topic that we're referring to, the UNHCR Age, Gender, and Diversity Mainstreaming Guidelines, which provides for 50% of equal representation for women. Other instruments are there, the 1995 Constitution, the Comprehensive Refugee Response Framework, and so on and so forth. But another interesting guideline which provides a backdrop for UN Women to promote the representation of women 50-50 is the new AU Gender Parity Project that calls for 50-50 representation of women and men at all levels. They've come up from the 35% of previous years and are now calling for 50-50. And we would also want to toe the line in accordance with that AU guideline. So having said that, it's important to note that the work of UN Women in refugee response in Uganda covers a wide range of areas, which include women's leadership and participation, women's economic empowerment, in terms of promoting their access to assets, access to incomes, opportunities. Of course, that shows the gaps that exist within the refugee response. We also support women's groups to participate in peace and security processes so that their contribution is valued, and they can also benefit from the dividends of peace and security. We also help to address the gap when it comes to equitable benefits from productive resources, such as land and access to other opportunities and services, and help mobilize and strengthen the agency of women so that we can together see to the elimination of violence against women and girls in refugee settings, not just in public spaces, but also private domains. So these are some of the key areas in which we have been working. And I would like to just give a very brief overview of the key, like 3 or 4 thematic areas where we support the refugee response and ensure that the gaps that exist actually bridged and the needs of women are met. In terms of coordination, as I said, we work very closely with the Office of the Prime Minister and work also very closely with local governments, as well as WFP, agencies like UNHCR and civil society to mainstream gender into their programming. The role of UN Women is to lead and coordinate on gender equality. So when there are gaps in the refugee response, our role is to step in and strengthen and bridge that gap and ensure that the needs of women and girls are met. We also support joint interagency assessments. For example, when I first came to the country, one of the key areas was the flood in Kasese, and we quickly mobilized, worked very closely with the other UN agencies to provide an assessment of the plight of the people on the ground, particularly women and girls for us. And we looked into the gender equality gaps, and we were able to support the needs there from a very strong gender perspective. We also train key humanitarian actors to mainstream gender using universally acceptable tools, just like the gender equality marker, where we support the measurement of the extent to which budgets and programs actually respond to gender equality, to ensure that there's tangibility in the response and not just policy directives, but also tangible results in the lives of women and girls. And of course, I mentioned the 50-50 parity, which currently we're working in one of the districts to ensure that women are well empowered, and also young women as well, so that they can participate effectively, and so we can have a 50-50 coordination of men and women in that regard. So also, yes, please.
That's Ms. Adekemi Indieli, the Deputy Country Representative, UN Women Uganda. Thank you very much for that humble submission. Let me also bring in Dr. Chris Dolan. He is the Director of Refugee Law Project. Dr. Chris, we do know that in Uganda here, we have some 1,494,505 refugees. Out of that number, 52% are females, largely 769,939 women. So what contributions and benefits have accrued from women in leadership leadership and participation in the Uganda's refugee response, contributions and benefits.
Yeah, thank you very much, Romeo, and thank you for the opportunity to join this dialogue. For those who are not familiar with Refugee Law Project, I just want to mention briefly, we're a community outreach project of the School of Law at Makerere University, established in 1999. For the last 3 years, we've been working with support from UN Women in women's empowerment. And just a couple of weeks ago, I was involved in some focus group discussions with women and men beneficiaries of that work up in Yumbe and Adjumani. We wanted to kind of check in with them and see what difference our programming had made for their lives. And that programming includes English for adults, so learning some basic English skills, leadership skills, public speaking, video skills training, establishment of peer support groups, and legal aid. And I must say, I did find myself wishing that anyone who's ever doubted the importance or the value or the feasibility of empowering refugee women, even in difficult circumstances, I found myself wishing that people could sit in on such a discussion. So when people were describing the kinds of gender norms they'd grown up with, you could see how important some of this work is. As women and girls, they were not supposed to take on public roles, not supposed to take any decisions in the household, not supposed to make any plans for themselves, including often not having any say over their own marriage and care roles, and yet being obliged to take on all of those roles and decisions when they became refugees. I think the value was also clear when they talked, for example, about how the empowerment support had helped them to cope better in terms of livelihoods. More than 10% had joined village savings and loan schemes, 10% of the women that we have worked with. Dozens have found employment in various different NGOs and elsewhere. Many now know how to speak up in public on matters of concern, and we've been doing this, helping women to access radio talk shows, but also election into leadership roles. They talked about being able to do what they would regard as a traditional nurturing role better, for example, by being able now to help their children with their homework, and even about establishing more balanced and more supportive relationships with their husbands. I think what also came clear was how in the space of less than 3 years, all the women in the group that I was talking with, the two groups I talked with, none of whom had previously been able to speak in English, most of whom had not previously held any kind of leadership position, but were now all able to engage in this very thoughtful discussion about opportunities and challenges of being in leadership, and the many ways in which it also intersects with the situation of their husbands, their fathers, their brothers, and their sons. And I just want to give briefly some figures. In Adjumani, we had 181 refugee women directly elected as leaders in Refugee Welfare Committee elections. In Maji 1, 2, and 3, in Pagirinya, Nyumanzi, Mungula, Agojo settlements, also as cluster leaders. And we had in Adjumani, again, 31 women reported securing jobs with other organizations such as Action Against Hunger, World Vision, Lutheran World Federation, and so on. In Yumbe, we had trained 209 women. And of those, a third, 62, have at least one role in various refugee and host community structures. In 2019, 35 women attained positions in refugee welfare committees, and 10 nationals were elected in their local councils. So I think we can see it's really, it's very important. It's also valuable, and it's very feasible to work on this empowerment with the kind of support we've had from UN Women. I think what also comes out of discussions is that Uganda as a country offers refugees opportunities to see how things can be done differently, and I think there's also no doubt that even though it's very difficult being a refugee in exile, the settlements and the urban areas in Uganda, with the right kind of support, can offer spaces and in which refugee women are able to learn new skills, attitudes, norms. And we believe that many of those will be carried back to countries of origin if they get a chance to do so. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Dr. Chris Dolan. He is the director of the Refugee Law Project. Let's also bring in Ms. Dawson Kusasire, a Community Services Officer, Office of the Prime Minister in Kampala. A very good afternoon, Ms. Dawson Kusasire. I would like you to paint for us a picture of the current situation, more of like the status quo of the current situation of women's leadership and participation in decision-making across Uganda's refugee response. Paint for us the status quo of what is happening. You're live on NTV Uganda, Ms. Dawson Kusasire. We simply wanted you to paint for us a picture of the status quo, the current situation of women's leadership and participation in decision-making across Uganda's refugee response. Dawson.
Yes, thank you, Romeo. Thank you, fellow panelists. Good afternoon. As you have said it in the beginning, that 1,494,505 is the total number of refugees. Of those, 769,939 are females, and it constitutes the 52% of the entire refugee population. That one underscores the reason why women should take up leadership positions, so that their issues are aired out clearly, and then they are involved in decision making and able to lead to bring out their issues that affect them. I can take you through the Refugee Act of 2006, which talks about the rights of refugee women. I quote, "A refugee woman shall have equal opportunities and access to procedure relating to refugee status, and affirmative action shall be taken to protect women refugees from gender discrimination practices. 2, a woman refugee is entitled to equal enjoyment and protection of all human rights and fundamental freedoms in economic, social, cultural, civil, or any other fields as provided for in the Constitution and other relevant laws in force in Uganda and international and regional instruments to which Uganda is a party, and in particular, 1, the Convention of Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the CEDAW 1979, and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. As provided for, like I said, in the Constitution, in Uganda, women are supposed to take 50% of leadership positions in the leadership structures. So in the refugee response, we have a leadership structure referred to as the refugee welfare committees, which is akin to the local council leadership structure in Uganda, where you are supposed to have 50% of the leaders as women. So it is what we are trying to do in the refugee response. However, we find that in some areas we are almost achieving that, and in other areas we are still far away from achieving the 50%. I can draw you to an example of 2 examples that we have. For example, the refugee welfare committees that we have, where women are supposed to take positions as women. But in settlements, like for example, Nakivale, you find that women are not yet empowered to take up leadership positions. They only take up that leadership position, which is for a woman, which is a must, and it's given. So they don't come up, take up leadership positions like chairperson, like a vice chairperson, but they come in and take up that position as a woman representative. And then another thing they can also do as women is that they can be taken in as treasurers in those refugee committees, and that is in Nakivale. But however, in other settlements, you find that they are almost achieving the 50%. I can also give an example of Parodinya, where it is a must that on the committee, if the chairperson is a man, then the vice must be a female. So we are almost achieving the 50, but we are now at 49. I can also draw you to the example of the Refugee Engagement Forum, which sits on the comprehensive refugee response framework, where women are represented, and we have a total of about 33 members from the refugee hosting districts, and three are from the refugee settlements. So of the three, one is a woman, one is a man, and another one is a youth. So you find that youth is a female. So REF is mostly composed of women.
Danson Kusashira, she is a community services officer, working with the Office of the Prime Minister in Kampala. Let's also bring in a woman refugee leader from Adjumani district. That's none other than Miss Lily Anek. Please paint for us a picture of how dire the situation is within the refugee camps within Adjumani district. Yes, what are some of those challenges affecting women in leadership in Adjumani district, and how can they be addressed? Lily Anek. Lily Anek, if you can hear me. Yes. We want to know the challenges that are affecting women in leadership in the refugee settlements, and also how can these challenges be addressed. Lily Anek, the platform is yours. All right. Lily Anek, you can unmute your mic. That's the reason why we can't hear you verifiably. But we wanted you to address the challenges that are affecting women within the refugee settlements. All right, let's go to Apollo Gabazira, the Country Director, Care International. Yes, a very good afternoon, Gabazira. We would like to know, how do you feel about the gains and opportunities, especially the gains that we've achieved in ensuring that we enhance women's leadership within these settlements, and how can these gains be harnessed? Gabazira?
Thank you, Romero. I assume you hear me. I am here this afternoon talking for Care International in Uganda, but also for the refugee programming work that has been done very well by various civil society and other global players. We've been in this country, Romeo, from 1951, and the last 3 years have been very challenging in terms of our humanitarian mandate, the humanitarian mandate that CARE carries across the world. The refugee response in the southwest, in the north, in West Nile has come with incredible demands in a situation where we are seeing dwindling resources. For us as an organization, our focus is women and girls, and we are here this afternoon talking about the gains and opportunities that the women and the girls have made in the last few years. And I'll right away shift on to that, Romeo.
How do we consolidate?
Well, we, as an agency, sorry?
Yes, go ahead. How do we consolidate those gains?
Yeah, as an agency, we talk about helping these refugees reclaim their rights, challenge social norms, lead their communities in times of emergencies. And remember, we are talking about women and girls here, the ever enduring and vulnerable lot. So we get excited when we see the progress that has just been enumerated by various speakers. And our excitement, Romeo, is at two levels. One is the agency level, the level at which we look at the woman and the girl. What has she gained out of this? There is excitement about women partaking of the spaces that are emerging in their governance, local governance setups.
Yes.
And we've seen a lot of that in the refugee camps. CARE has a wonderful example of a lady called Halato in Omugo Settlement 6 that mobilized agencies, including the UN, actually didn't mobilize, challenged agencies, including the UN and other players, to bring food distribution points nearer to the settlement. They were having to walk 10 kilometers, and on that walk, faced with all sorts of challenges, including GBV, gender-based violence. So we are seeing women coming up, voicing, challenging, lobbying, and influencing decisions on some of the things we are doing. So from an agent's perspective, that is something that we feel good about, that we're excited about. Romeo, the confidence, the poise, you're a man like myself here, and we know that social cultural challenges in this part of the world can subjugate, can see women at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of rights, in terms of their power.
Indeed.
But we've seen with programming and those of other players, our programming and those of the other players in this space, women increasing in confidence, having better poise, challenging the status quo, and in that, securing some of their rights. So they've not had for a long time. So that's at the agents, individual level.
Indeed, Apollo Gabazira.
Feel excited about.
Indeed, Apollo Gabazira, in respect to the gains that we've made, please paint for us a picture of what the future looks like for women in leadership, keeping in mind that they make up 52% of the 1.4 million, over 1.4 million refugees that we have. What does the future look like for them?
What does the future look like? Thank you, Romeo. I think it's we certainly have work to do. Let's not pretend here. But at the same time, there are gains. There are nascent gains on the table that we have to build on, that we have to coalesce around. So I look at a number of pieces here as critical to securing the space attained for women leadership and adding on to that. One is collective, working within groups. We've seen that secure the fortunes of women. This government, as you know, Romeo, via the NDP3, via the parish development model, via civil society players, is creating space around women collectives. Right now, they're actually talking about developing a policy framework for savings groups, for women collectives. For me, that's something which, that space, that players like us, players like the UN, players like you, and the government indeed should watch in terms of continuing to grow the capacity and the assurance of rights for women to lead.
Mr. Apollo Gabazira is the country director at CARE International Uganda. Many thanks, my good man, for that submission. We are running out of time. We wanted to go and talk to a refugee desk officer hailing from Adjumani district, and there's none other than Mr. Jogo Titus. A very good afternoon, Jogo Titus. Thank you for joining us too from Adjumani district. We'd like you to paint for us the experience. What has been the experience of enhancing women's leadership in the Adjumani refugee settlement? Sir, please acquaint us.
Good afternoon, Romeo. I bring you greetings from Adjumani.
Indeed.
Adjumani district, as a refugee hosting district, has a population of over 200,000 refugees. And out of this, 53% are women. That is an indicator that we need women representation on all leadership structures. For the context of the South Sudanese, we are all aware that South Sudan broke away from the main Sudan, and because of the restrictions of the Sharia law, which did not bring up the voices of women. There has been a lot of progress ever since South Sudan attained independence in 2011. However, the war that broke up in 2013 derailed all of the efforts that had been made. It came up with the issues of violation of the rights of women, gender-based violence, to mention but a few. So for the case of Adjumani, we've conducted several refugee welfare committee elections. For example, in 2016, out of the 660 refugee leaders, 277 were women, making a 42%. We are very far from the 50-50 parity. In 2019, when we undertook another election, out of the 732 refugee leaders, 353 were women. This took us to a total representation of 52% of women participating in these leadership structures. Just a couple of weeks, we concluded elections, and which brought in offices, 780 refugees. Out of these, 418, making a total percentage of 54 are women being presented on these committees. But much as this is making us as a model refugee desk officer, as far as encouraging refugee participation in leadership structures, it has not come out from a silver plate. We've been making a lot of engagements with refugees, together with our partners, the UN Women, through its implementing partner refugee law project. We have rewarded the refugee leaders who have excelled in the performances. We have model refugee leaders who will go on parading in other settlements to show that leadership or participation in leadership by women contributes a lot as far as their welfare, their well-being is concerned. This has been our experience as far as refugee women participation in leadership in Adjumani is concerned. Thank you.
Jogo Titus is a refugee desk officer working in the office of the Prime Minister, hailing from Adjumani district, where he's working round the clock to ensure that he enhances leadership women within leadership positions. We also do have a woman refugee leader hailing all the way from Adjumani district, and that's none other than Miss Lily Ann Ek. From her very own perspective, we'd like to know what challenges have actually befallen women in leadership and what is there to address such challenges. Lily Ann Ek, you're live. The platform is yours. Did you unmute your mic?
Thank you very much, moderator. Good
Yes.
afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank you for hosting us in this very important joint meeting.
It's our pleasure, Anek.
By the name Lila Nekokuma, as stated, I from Pagrinya refugee settlement come in Adjumani desk office. I was a former vice chairperson in Adawosi 3 structure, and I've been contesting also for a chairperson in Adawosi 3 structure, but I was in the position of number 3. I thank UN Sarah, OPM, UN Women, and other implementing partners for giving us chance to stand as in the leadership as women. Because in our way back from our origin, we were not allowed to speak in the public. So the challenges that we are facing in refugees leadership as being a woman, cultural resilience, we are undermined by men that we could not be in position to speak in front of the public. So in case they will find out in the office as being a vice chairperson, they will undermine what you are telling them. So this is the big challenge that we are facing. And also low level of standard. For us, long ago, our father was not training girls' child in the school. So they undermine the right of girls' child. So you will find that although you have been appointed in the position to lead, you may face problems like speaking in English and also writing, because in other meetings you find that there will be no translation in the dialect. So this is the problem that we are facing, the challenge that we are facing in leadership. And also burden, you find that we have been overloaded with very many activities of work. You have to work from home, and also now balancing work in the office and work at home also, it has become our problems. Because sometimes you find that your husband will not allow you to go for the meeting, while that is a very important meeting that can help the community. So those are the challenges that we are also getting in the leadership. And also transport. You find that when you had a call to go for that meeting, there will be no transport for you because they used to support a bus call in Adawosi 3 to a chairperson, which means a vice chairperson, when it's called for the meeting, will be difficult for her to look for the transport. And also in a communication way, airtime, we have limited airtime. Although the phone has been selected, like to the vice, to the Secretary of Education, but other leaders have not been given with the support of the phone. Although they have given this telephone, you find that airtime, loading airtime is also a problem to us, and also charging it, because you have to charge by maybe per day 500. So it is too costly, like if we are undergoing the economic hardship. So how can this issue be addressed to the office is, they have to address us with this, bring for us inclusive adult literacy And also they have to send girls in the school. Like a girl child who has finished senior six, they have to undermine, they have to mind of the point that this girl get, so that the girl will be sent to the school. And also we have our girl in the teaching institutions, like in primary. Some have stopped in senior 4, some have stopped in senior 6, they're teaching in secondary school. They're great, they have to upgrade them. They have to give for them, go ahead, like in high institutions, like in university, also taking them for the training like PTC. So this is also what we are facing. And also empowering us, sensitizing others. Women should stand for leadership, right from the cluster level, like a committee in the Boa Hall. This is how they will get trained in leadership, because when in the lower level, they are not standing for leadership. Also, in the higher level, they cannot also lead people, because you have to get trained from down, then you go with it up. And also the office have to sensitize the men to leave all the burden that women are having. Giving too much work to a woman, giving, like producing yearly, also affecting us. So the office to sensitize this thing to men, so that men release us from those burdens, that in case of any incoming election, we shall find that it will be 50-50% in balance with other
Indeed.
men. And also men should encourage their women not to be idle, because we find that in education level, we are going the same with them. But coming to leadership, they have not to overrule us not to go for leadership. So those are the point that I could put across.
Wonderful insights by Miss Lily Anek. She is a woman refugee leader, yes, hailing from Ajumani district. She was painting a picture of the challenges that have befallen women in leadership, and she also did give us some pointers on how to address those particular concerns. I also do have the assistant representative in charge of protection under the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and that's none other than Margaret Ann Atieno. She joins us live right now. Margaret, before we get into consolidating the gains that have been achieved over the years, let's talk about something that Lily Anek already hinted on, the fact that our society is highly patriarchal, and that's why we have few women in leadership positions, especially in the refugee settlements. And those women who have been so lucky to get some positions are not being facilitated. Please expand more on that, and then we can talk about consolidating the gains hand in hand with the government.
Sorry, Romeo, the last question didn't come through quite clear. Will you repeat it, please?
Yes, before we get into what UNHCR and government are doing to consolidate the gains that have been achieved in the past as far as women in leadership is concerned, let's also talk about a concern that has just come up from Lily Anek, a woman refugee leader, who is saying the patriarchal nature of this country makes it impossible to have women within positions of leadership, especially in the refugee settlements. And also, she says that even those who are lucky to be in those positions are not being facilitated whatsoever.
Thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to celebrate Lily and also Noella, the two women leaders who, in this World Refugee Day, have come out to share their experience with us. I think it's very courageous of them to come out and speak of these things. I think I would, on this very question of the cultural practices, this is really some of the barriers that we have noted in the refugee program over the years. And this is also why we have come up with very specific policies to address this. And our colleague from OPM spoke about the policy, the Refugee Act itself, giving affirmative action for women. I think what we need to do is really to bring this to life and make it, make it practical. We have several programs within the refugee operation, not only by UNHCR, but all the partners, those who are here today and others who are not, that are actually bringing that into practice. They do have programs focusing only on empowering women, supporting their leadership skills, supporting them even to overcome some of the difficulties that they're facing within their homes, addressing the very specific needs that they would have within the family that would be an obstacle. And I think also we really just need to increase the awareness within the refugee community, work with the men, obviously, the male leaders. And I thank the male leaders that we have on this team and also in the refugee program. And Uganda as a country really has a lot of progress in this. So we really just need to increase the awareness. We need to bring the education, work with the men to be able to address this. I think it can be done. It has been done. Of course, there's room for improvement. But thank you very much, Lily, for sharing that experience with us.
Margaret, how can we consolidate the gains?
Yes, so first of all, I would just like to align myself with the contributions made by the country representative of UNHCR during the talk show yesterday on World Refugee Day. And really the key message that he gave yesterday was on the question of solidarity. And I think that this is really the core issue when it comes to the expression of the refugee convention and how actually it can be implemented in practice. It is all about protecting those who are most vulnerable amongst us. And I think that it is not, it is not a strange thing to us. In our region here in East Africa, we call it undugu. Undugu has always been part of how we live. In South Africa, it is called Ubuntu. It basically means that we work together. We are one community. We can do this together. And again, if I go back to the example that
Atieno, the Assistant Representative Protection at the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, we've largely run out of time, but thank you very much for your humble submission. And to all my panelists who have been able to speak to us right here on NTV Uganda, many thanks for having made the time to speak to us. And my name is Rome Busiku. I'll largely break off for 4 to 5 minutes, then we shall get into NTV at 1. Please keep it here.